So we're going to review the parts of a shaded form today, and we're going to use our colored pencils to do it. The first one we're going to do is just going to be done with pencil pressure. So we're just going to use one pencil and then varying pencil pressure in order to create the shading and the values. Okay, now I want you to be doing your outlines in pencil. I'm going to use a Sharpie once I have it sketched out correctly so you guys can see it a little more. So first I'm going to, well, maybe I don't need to use a Sharpie. You can kind of see it. So first I'm going to sketch out a sphere. We're going to go over the parts of a form using a sphere. A sphere is the most simple form, all consistent all the way around. Light hits it in a smooth way. So notice that I sketch my circle kind of a lot until it's actually a circle. Please don't shade ugly ovals. So you should have a circle, and it should be a decent size, okay? Please don't shade a tiny circle. It should be, you know, kind of the width of your thumb. So we're going to go ahead and start just like this, okay? So here, we're going to go ahead and label this as our light source. Okay, now our light source and our cast shadow are always on opposite ends of our subject. So if the light source is here, then my cast shadow would be here. If my light source was on this side, the shadow would come over here. So we're going to label everything so you have these notes. And goodness. Where is it back there? So this part of our form is our cast shadow, okay? It is cast onto another surface. Camera's having a hard time focusing today, sorry guys. Okay, so it is the shadow that is cast onto another surface. Okay, so a cast shadow is on something other than the object itself. Okay, going from our cast shadow towards our light source. The next part of our shaded form is our reflected highlight. So that is a reflected highlight from the light that is hitting the surface of the table and then bouncing back up onto the sphere. And that runs right along the bottom edge of our sphere. Okay. Then inside there, farther closer to the light source, is our core shadow. Okay, that's going to be the darkest part of our form, our core shadow. So you'll notice that the shapes of these kind of areas mimic the shape of the actual form. So we're going to use these directional lines, these contour lines that kind of help show the curve of the sphere. Moving on from the core shadow is our mid-tone. Okay, those are like halfway points. These are going to be our light values in here, and then even farther still we have our highlight, which is our brightest area of the form. So you can go ahead and pause the video here if you need to recreate this little drawing, but we want to have these parts labeled on our sketchbook, okay? You can also go ahead and fill in your cast shadow if you would like. Now in between the cast shadow and the reflected highlight is our apex, so where the subject kind of hits the table. And that will be a very small area, but it will also be very, very dark. So now we're going to recreate that shaded form, or create that shaded form using colored pencils and pressure. So I'm going to sketch out a circle in just pencil first. So notice how if I see that it's got like a little lumpy corner, I smooth that out. So I'm sketching my pencil kind of repeatedly around until I have an accurate circle, or as accurate as I'm going to get. And I'm not going to separate the parts in pencil for this because I want to be able to just shade them in smooth colored pencil. I am going to go ahead and draw my light source, as well as a little bit of that cast shadow. So I can use my colored pencil palette from before, and I want to choose a color that's rich in pigment and not too light, so I'm going to go with one of my vibrant blues. So I'm going to go with 901. It's kind of a navy blue, a blue indigo it's called. And that's the pencil I'm going to use. For this, I would like you to use the blended technique or the refined technique. So I don't want you to be hatching or cross-hatching. And we're going to lay in the values according to our labels. So we know that our core shadow is going to kind of curve right around the bottom middle. And I know that this area of my form is going to be really dark comparatively to my other areas. So I'm going to go ahead and start laying in some value using small circles with that blended technique. Now as I move down this way, I'm going to lighten up my pressure because I have my reflected highlight. And then as I move towards the apex, I can get even just a little darker. I don't want it to be an outline, I still want it to be a shaded form, so see how I'm using light pressure and blending that value up. And as I continue in this circular motion, the same motions as my form, I'm going to continue to lighten up my pressure the closer I get to the highlight. I want to be really careful to really have really light pressure when I'm going around my highlight so I don't accidentally color it too dark. Colored pencils do not erase, really. I mean, they can kind of lighten up a little bit, but not much. So it's really important that you plan out where your highlights go. So you don't lose them. Now even though I'm doing a blue sphere where the light is hitting it the strongest, it'll be pretty white, so I'm going to leave an area untouched by my pencil. And then I'm going to push my mid-tones a little bit more mid-tony, they're very light. So just like with the leaf, I am building values and layers and colors slowly in layers. I don't just jump right in. In case I'm making a mistake, I want to go slow, so I still have tooth of the paper to adjust it. And your reflected highlight should not be quite as vibrant as the direct highlight, the highlight that is directly on the being hit by the sun or the light or your light source. The reflected highlight will have lost a little bit of the light as it hits the table and then bounces back. So I want you to create a smooth sphere, and then with our cast shadow, remember to change your directional lines. This is on a table, so the surface of it would be horizontal, so my tool mark should be going horizontal as well. And I like to get really dark right where that apex is, where it's hitting that, so it really kind of sets the object down on the ground, and then I can get a little bit lighter with my cast shadows. And go ahead and label that sphere shading with pressure. Okay, so this was one pencil and only using pressure with your hand to create those different values. Okay, only using heavy pressure, medium pressure, and light pressure to create the range of value. So for the next two spheres, we're going to use two different types of colored pencils and values to create these spheres. This one, we just did shading with pencil pressure. One pencil, only pencil pressure. This one, we're going to use 3 pencils. And we're going to do some shading with a color, black, and white. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a nice normal middle of the road color that's like mid-tone color. We don't want it to be dark blue or light blue. We want it to be just regular blue. So this is my 903, which you can tell is pretty vibrant blue, but it's not too dark. I'm going to get my black pencil as well as my white pencil. Sharpen any color off your white pencil if you have it. See how I have color on the end of it there. So sharpening it will clean that up. So now I'm using 2 different values, my black and my white, as well as my color, to create shading on this form. So I'm going to still use pencil pressure, but I have more kind of options because I can mix it with white, mix it with black. So as I move over to the right side, I'm going to get it nice and dark, light. So then I'm going to blend, same way we did our colored pencil techniques, heavy pressure on one side, and then as I move into the blue, I'm going to lighten up the pressure of my black. And then on this side, I'm going to lay some white down. It's kind of smearing the blue around. And then I could even lay down more color, get closer to burnishing. Okay, so with these 3 pencils, I'm going to shade this form. Okay, now I want to create a blue looking sphere, so I am pretty confident in my ability to shade most of this sphere pretty solid blue. I want to keep my highlights nice and strong, so just like the first one, I want to use very light pressure around that highlight, and I'm going to mix some of that blue with white too. So I'm going to barely put any color down there. And then as I am moving away from that, in kind of a circular motion, I'm getting darker, more pencil pressure as I move away from that highlight. Until I can get to that kind of mid-tone blue. Now I'm going to get a little closer to burnishing. So right now there's lots of color that you can still see through my or sorry, lots of paper that you can see through the color. So lots of like white little static dots in there. I'm going to go ahead and layer this one even more. Now I'm going to switch to my black, and I'm going to add black over the core shadow. But I don't want it to just be a stripe of black. So here's where I want to use my pressure technique and my light pressure to fade that black out into the blue. Once I have a decent range of the blue and black, I can almost go in, or of the black and white, I can go in with more blue and push harder, and it'll just keep that shading for me. I can kind of go a little quicker. Kind of lost its sphere shape for a sec there. And I'm going to start at the highlight, and I'm just going to take my white and blend it outward. And as that white is blending with the pigment that's already on the paper, it's going to kind of smooth that texture out. I'm going to get to where the black is starting, and then just a little bit over it, but then I'm going to stop with my white because I don't want my shadow area to be darker. You don't want to burnish too much with black because it goes too far. So now what I'm doing is over the black, I am burnishing with the blue. So I'm pushing really hard, killing the tooth of the paper and the texture. So the pigment that's already on the paper is mixing with the blue pigment that I'm putting down. So I can use this burnishy quality to create really smooth surfaces, even though it's on a rough paper texture. The more I push, the more that surface smooths out. Right at the apex of that shadow is going to be nice and dark. Then I can fade those shadows out. Oh, hopefully that wasn't too far off the screen. And the last box, or the last type of shading that I'm going to do is going to be using more than just one color and black and white. I'm going to be shading with color and color temperature as well. So more than using just blue and black and white, I'm going to use blue, a little bit of green, a little bit of dark blue, dark blue, maybe even a little bit of purple where that core shadow is. So I'm going to use my palette to look at some numbers and see, okay, what's going to mix well, what's going to look good, what's going to blend together smoothly. And then before I try doing that, I want to see if they'll blend together in a smaller rectangle. Okay, so I'm going to start with purple right here. And let it blend it, fade it out. Then we go to dark blue, then we go to light blue, or like bright blue, not really light blue. Then we go to lighter blue. And we can go transition to green. And then we're gonna go green to white. So that's a pretty smooth transition. I can shade a sphere with those colors pretty well, just like I can shade them with that, but it's gonna take a little bit more layering and thinking to get all those colors in there. So while I'm doing this, I'm gonna keep my pencils to my side in the value order that I'm using to draw with them. So I'm ready to grab them at any chance. So I'm going to start with my very darkest shadow area, and I'm going to go ahead and put small circles, not too much pressure. I want to be able to adjust it. We always want to start with light pressure like this and not pushing too hard, because if we're maybe using the wrong color or we're making a mistake, and 20 minutes from now you realize that you've made a mistake, if you have some of that paper left, we can change it or alter it. Or if 20 minutes from now Miss Cohagen says, oh, you're doing this all wrong, fix it, then you can. So I want my individual colors to fade out. I'm still using that kind of pressure, but now I'm mixing color along with it. So I'm always overlapping colors. Almost never do I have just a single color alone on the paper, especially when we're doing color transitions like this. We don't want anyone to be able to tell that's where it goes from blue to green. We want it to subtly change. So we want to overlap all of our colors, mix them together. This also helps create color temperature unity by mixing your colors together. My reflected highlight in there. It's not a very good sphere, but gonna kind of use my base color to give me some more defined edges. The sphere was kind of more of a blob that kept growing. That looks a little better. So see how I'm continually picking up different pencils and layering things slowly, not pushing down too hard. I want to be able to make changes as I go, so I could take this sphere and make it all a little bit more purple or all a little bit more green. So let's say that this surface is also kind of this blue color. So we're not using black and white. So instead of using a black, we're going to use that purple. Sorry guys, how much of this video is going to be off the screen? So we have 3 different ways to shade with colored pencils that all result in the same pieces of a shaded form. Practice all 3 of these ways: shading with pressure, shading with a color and black and white, and then shading with multiple colors in your sketchbook, and then upload this page to your digital sketchbook.